Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of Don't Run Into Glass, a podcast hosted by the Citizen.in. I'm Gayati.
And I'm Anika.
And Anika, what are we chatting about today?
Today we're talking about a new fairy tale. A man married a woman and then breastfed off her to consummate. We're talking about Pumping and Humping, a podcast about adult breastfeeding.
Adult breastfeeding. I'm just going to repeat that in case anyone missed it in their in your opening.
ADF, baby, ADF.
ADF. But Anika, I want to correct you. In this modern fairy tale, it's not just a man marries somebody. It could be any two consenting adults. It could be men, women, partners, lovers, not lovers.
A group of people.
A group of people.
It could be
anything.
anything.
It could be anyone. And exactly, we're talking about adult breastfeeding. And I think we should also tell everyone who's tuned in how we came up with the idea for this. And I think everyone who is tuning in has probably come across that article that appeared in Vice on adult breastfeeding, which went viral. I think everyone's read it. And we have Arman Khan, who wrote that piece for Vice, joining us today.
Yes, I am so excited to talk to him. So many questions. Do you have any, Getty? You've been a recent mother. I bet everyone sent you that link as soon as it came. I was like, girl, what's your take? So what is your take, Getty?
Honestly, Anika, that article came out at a point where I was actually feeding my child. So for me, it was like, this hormonally beautiful, amazing bonding experience that I was having. And then I was getting these mass forwards about this piece and Vice. And I don't know, initially I was just appalled. I was like, how do you sexualize something that is such a nurturing biological entity or part of being, a mom? But once I checked myself and my own sort of like, my hypocrisy at my reaction, I realized that anything that two consenting adults do in the privacy of their bedrooms is their damn business and nobody else. As long as it's not harming anyone and as long as it's consensual, who the hell are we to judge? All women have breasts. Men have breasts as well. And all women are capable of lactating. And now if two people want to indulge in that in a more sexualized form, all the power to them. So I'm taking a completely non-judgmental view on this. And I'm very pro-fetish at the moment. But Anika, I have to admit, it took me a minute to check myself because my initial reaction was like, what the hell? This is weird. This is weird. Yeah. Why are you writing an article on this? Why are we talking about this? And why are people indulging in this? Yeah. But like once I checked my own sort of, the fact that I was being just a prude.
We are all prudes in our way. And you know what, Getty? I don't think we are alone to blame in being a prude. We have been, as girls growing up in Delhi, right? In our own homes, we have been raised to kind of protect our honor, kind of not look at things in a certain way, kind of look at things in a civil manner, be obedient, all of these things. So you can't blame us if you're a prude. But I think we've come a long way, people like you and I, when we are shocked, we check our shocking, but at the same time explore the objective facts. And that's what I did when I read that article. I was like, let me just hear other people talk about it. And I was most interested to hear someone who engages in adult breastfeeding as a primary form of intimacy. And I found this woman on a podcast and I found a bunch of very interesting facts. All right, do you want to hear some of them?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, the first one was that every woman, whether she's pregnant or not even planning to have a child, can actually lactate. That means that she can actually release breast milk even if she doesn't have a baby coming or has a baby in front of her. And the commitment to something like this for the sake of sex or intimacy or fetishizing all of this, the commitment was amazing. This woman said she wanted to get into it. She was very excited by it. So for 4 days, for 9 hours, she engaged at someone sucking on her breast so that she could lactate later. Now that it has become a normal form of her being with someone else, and in fact, she's in a very stable relationship with someone who is, an adult breastfeeder, and they have a master-slave relationship in that. There, she takes up to 4 hours to actually release milk. It was so interesting. My first understanding of this was when I was reading a Hunter Thompson book, the same guy who wrote Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. There was this short autobiography of his where he had actually gotten a lady to stay with him, and this was one of the plays that they used to engage in. So this adult breastfeeding and it being a fetish is very interesting for me. It makes me also kind of go back to like Monica Geller from Friends, the Holy Bible. Remember that episode where she was pointing out 7 zones which are important to make a woman happy when you are with a woman, right? So breast was an integral part of it. So we shouldn't be shocked, but at the same time, it's a very interesting expansion into our, sexual lives, right?
Yeah, I think for me, there are a couple of aspects that are very interesting. One is, and I think Arman will speak about this in more detail when he joins us, but one is the fact that it's not just a sexual relationship between two people. There's an emotional angle to something like breastfeeding as well, right? And Arman, in his article, he points out that a lot of the people who indulge in adult breastfeeding, they need to feel nurtured and loved and, almost taken care of by a woman. And that is one of the reasons why they're attracted to this form of intimacy. Another person that Arman interviewed had been, laid off because of the unemployment crisis and felt very emasculated. And this was like, again, like a release for them from that aspect of their lives. So I think it's interesting that it's not just sexual, it's also emotional and very like parallel to what society is it's like almost like a mirror image of society, Anika. And fetishes, I think, often a mirror image of what conservative society wants you to do and be and act like. And I think, again, we'll discuss this with Arman in more detail, but I always wonder that, repression, we talk about why repression leads to so many issues in society. And in India, where we see a lot of violence against women, we see aggression, we see, men groping women on the streets, or even men being abusive towards women in their general language. You wonder whether that is because of the sexual repression that we have, where very normal behavior, whether it is certain kind of fetishes or your sexual desires, are not spoken about in a healthy manner.
They're not spoken about at all, right, Getty? Like, I think we've done that episode on Sanskari House also, how it's like people talking about their sexuality is almost equated to like people coming out about being a grown adult, sometimes. And this whole thing about fetishes, kinks, these words in themselves still continue to have like a sort of a negative connotation, like you're doing something that should be very hush-hush behind closed doors. Don't discuss it in public. And sure, when you are intimate with a person, that in itself is very private. However, to demonize things that are other than missionary, is very wrong. And it results in a super repressed sort of an atmosphere, right? And you have like so many examples of extremely repressed people, coming out and becoming so explosive in ways that could be so damaging, not only to themselves, but people around them. They're danger zone, man. And I think at the end of the day, like fetishes are not bad. Fetishes were normal back in the day. You had Tawayaf Khanas here in India. You have geishas who are there in Japan. Now, this was one of those very elite, refined, form of hosting where women were trained. In fact, these women were some of the most educated women in the country at the time, because other women were not getting educated as well as them. These were women of intelligence and wit. And, at the end of the day, Gabby, who's to judge whether you get off on the foot or you get off on someone's brain? It's just something to get off on, it's not something bad as long as it's within these boundaries, right?
Yeah, as long as it's consensual and it's not harming anyone. Obviously, if something is non-consensual or you're forcing someone or even putting any kind of pressure on somebody to engage in an act for your own sexual needs that person is uncomfortable doing, then there is of course something very, very problematic about it. But as long as something is consensual and it's not harming anybody, it's within the confines of your bedroom or your whatever living room or your car or whatever the hell it might be, it's not bothering anyone, and we're no one to judge. I think that's the realization I kind of like had, and I was quite surprised at my initial reaction of disgust. I mean, now I'm quite surprised. But I have to admit that was my initial reaction. I mean, I was like, who are these people who are like, engaging in ABF and thinking it's normal? But then the moment I thought about it, and I was like, if you and I, like if a group of girls were sitting and we were talking about like, fetish, and a friend of mine told me that this is something that she'd indulged in, I wouldn't bat an eyelid. I would just be like, okay, actually, that's quite normal. The moment it's written as an article and it's posted on Instagram, and then all these like hate comments come and everyone acts like this is like the most taboo thing and you cannot do it, you cannot touch it. It's our own innate hypocrisy. And for me, I think
it is.
It's our own innate hypocrisy. And it's our hypocrisy that is probably like leading to so many problems that we're seeing in society. I mean, all this like toxic masculinity, this repression, all of this is coming from just not being able to have a healthy relationship with our fetishes. I mean, if you want to get freaky, you want to get freaky, man. Like, within these boundaries.
And get freaky, man. Life can be boring pretty sometimes. And if you and your partner want to get weird, it's totally fine. Being sex positive is one thing, but being like denying sex, especially in a country which has the largest population in the world. I mean, were all of you divinely ordained, or like what happened,
Yeah, totally. So let's get Arman on. I think, our listeners have probably had enough of you and I talking about our realization that we're prudes. I mean, I never thought I was a prude, but I think this article made me realize that I am a bit of a prude. But yeah, I don't think anyone wants to hear more about that.
No, but a note of power to us. I think we have learned by calling ourselves out and checking ourselves. We've actually explored something that has normalized so rapidly in our brain. And I hope that happens with the rest of the people who listen to this podcast,
Yeah, you're not, there's nothing wrong with you guys. Enjoy your freaky side. I think that's
live your best fantasy, baby. It's all good.
Yeah, so let's get Arman on.
Welcome, Arman. We're so happy to have you join this exciting conversation. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. Well, we always start by asking you to introduce yourself to our audience. Please go ahead. We're so curious about you.
Well, thank you, Anika, for having me. I can't wait to talk to you about the mess and the raids that the article has turned out to be. I'm Arman Khan. I am 25 years old. I am based in Mumbai. I'm a journalist. I'm a freelance journalist, but then I think I cover all kinds of topics, and I've contributed to various publications across the board, from Vice, Nat Geo, GQ, Vogue, Grazia, Dem, Swaddle, and everything. And I try to mostly write at the intersection of Muslim minority rights, the queer imagination, of course, sex, relationships, once in a while interiors also for AD. So yeah, I pretty much like doing everything that I can possibly do. So yeah, that's me.
And Arman, I have to tell you that I basically got the link to this adult breastfeeding article that you wrote for Vice on pretty much every social media platform that I'm on. So on WhatsApp groups, on Instagram. And I think it's mainly because, our social circle now is a lot of new moms. So I think a lot of recently pregnant and postpartum women and men who are in relationships with these women. And first, when I saw this article, I was like, this is just Vice, like attempting clickbait. I was like, this is not real. This is just clickbait. And then when I finally read it, I was just quite amazed at what an, journalistic exercise this entire piece was. It was, as a fellow journalist, I want to congratulate you on actually how well researched this piece was, because all the, the humor that you were sort of approaching the piece with through the clickbait aspect of it went away, and it became a very serious, almost eye-opening read. So from a journalistic perspective, I'm very curious to know, how did you come up with the idea for this article? What was your editor's reaction? And how did you find the sources for a piece like this?
Well, I'm glad it was viral in that regard. I think that's music to any journalist's ears, that the article is being shared widely in WhatsApp group. That's all we ever want, is for people to read the article. But yeah, I think on a serious note, rather, the idea came to me through a friend of mine who is gigolo, a male escort, a male sex worker. And he told me that, this happened to him. and I also quote him in the piece, wherein he was asked to do this to someone. And although his story was pretty simple and normal, not controversial at all, technically speaking, he was like, there was this woman and she wanted him to to latch on to her lactating breasts while her 1-month-old son was literally in the swaddle, so he was a little weirded out. He was like, oh, well, that was, but then he was like, Arman, that actually turned me on in a way that I had never been turned on. I was like, oh, well, that's something. And then of course, then I just put it at the back of my head. I was like, this is like, many men love boobs and love sucking on breasts. But what is different about this? That is sucking on lactating breasts, is that it's not just beyond a fascination towards breasts, right? There's something else now. Something else is at play here. Many men have fascination towards breasts, but then not many men can say they have fascination towards lactating breasts. So I dug a little bit deeper into the topic, went on to the dark web, saw what was there, spoke to a couple of intimacy coaches that I know, one of whom I also quote in the piece, I think, Pallavi Banwal, if I'm not wrong. They gave me some leads, a couple of other common friends, because obviously I keep doing these relationship stories, so there are always people. So I think that's how then it all started. It went on for a couple of months. It's actually because, it's not just like, and you can't put a story on Instagram, right? Hey, I'm looking for people who are into APF, please DM. You can't do that with these kind of stories. So I had to just keep on, just, I was like, I just leave it to fate. If there are people who will be, and I knew for a fact that this is I just got a hunch. I didn't know anybody personally, except my friend who was into this. But I was like, I'm pretty sure this is something which is, can lead somewhere. I spoke to a couple of therapists, a couple of neuropsychologists and all to see the mental health angle bit of it. And obviously there was obviously we'll discuss that. And then it took me almost 3 months really to just wait it out, take it slow. And then while this was happening, I spoke to my editor, Dhwani Solani, the editor of Vice India. And I told her, what, there's this bit. And she was like, oh, well, this is quite something. We definitely have to do this. But Arman, and this is what her brief always has been to me when I do stories about sex, that it needs to be Indian. It's totally, because see, Vice, we don't have Vice India anymore. It's all Vice.com, right? So our stories are promoted and can be seen on the same website as, let's say, an American or a Korean story will be. But it needs to have a global sensibility, of course. But for Indians, we need to make sure that this is an Indian phenomenon, right? That this is very much happening in India and not just in metros and cities, but everywhere. So please find unique Indian angles and unique Indian anecdotes which are uniquely Indian. So that I leave it to you. She told me that was the only brief from her side. And then obviously I actively sought out stories which had uniquely Indian angles to them. So yeah, it took 3 months for me to do the research bit.
So then before I go into something that I really wanted to share with everyone, I want to ask you, when you did your research, what did you find out?
Well, I found out that this was obviously a very prevalent phenomena, and it actually goes back to man's, and here I mean man, a man's primal instinct of being nurtured. I remember this quote from a Wong Kar-wai film, I keep forgetting, that men essentially become babies when they have sex. Of course, I'm generalizing here, but you get the point. That men become very vulnerable and they want to be nurtured and they want to be taken care of, right? And I wouldn't say extreme, but I would say a beautiful manifestation of that would be adult breastfeeding, wherein a man just becomes like this baby who just wants to seek refuge in there, in those lactating breasts, because there's actually milk coming out of it, and then it connects to the whole bit of mothering, which is present in many relationships. And then this also ties into the fact that I'm sure you must have had many friends who will tell you, here I mean female friends, who will, I'm Anika, I'm tired of being a mother in a relationship. I'm tired of mothering my boyfriend. I can't mother my boyfriend anymore. Many women have this, the mother complex, wherein they always feel they can fix they can fix their man, or they will take care of their man. They will, I don't know, let's say if the man has any vices or any bad habits, they can fix that, you know. So extreme manifestation, again, I'm using the word extreme very loosely here, is ABF, I realized. And then when I spoke to people, the people who I've quoted in the piece, I wanted again to make sure, like I told you, my editor's brief, that it needs to be unique. I wanted to spread it across India. You know, what's happening in different parts of India, not just in some posh apartment in GK or somewhere in Bandra, but what's happening throughout India. So let's say, through the example of Tonkar in Manipur, I think, we see that, which is a very matrilineal tribe society. In Manipur is largely matrilineal and matrimonial that way. These things take on a completely different character, wherein you have men, you have the woman who is more or less, you know, in these matriarchal matrilineal societies, they anyway have a social upper hand on men. Although some would argue that it's only very ritualistic. Khali naam ke liye hai. They don't actually have any rights. But more or less, they have on the surface, it seems like they do have the upper hand. So those men there, they kind of, they end up becoming, they don't really are very masculine in the traditional sense of the word. They don't have any, more or less, there isn't a trait of toxic masculinity that runs through them. So I found out through the example of, through the story of Tonkar, that, well, in those cases, it takes on, like I said, a very different character, wherein when they are going through something, he latches on to, because he can't do it with his mother, of course, so he does it to his wife, in which case he tells me that, you know, I have to do this every day. So but she can't lactate every day, but when she's lactating, those days are very intense then, you know. So that was one thing I found out. And then, for example of, I think the guy, I'm forgetting his name. Obviously, they are anonymous anyway, but this guy who lost his job during India's unemployment crisis before COVID, when India hit a 45-year low unemployment record, government's own statistics, by the way. This was just after the elections, 2019 elections, when India hit a 45-year unemployment record. This was the guy who also lost his job. Until then, he'd been brought up in this frame of mind that a man needs to be the breadwinner, right? The man needs to be the one who will take care of the family, right? But when he lost his job, he was like, "Oh, what the fuck? You know, this can't be happening to me of all people." And his wife kind of then, you know, there was a bit of power play involved there. Like, you know what? Well, here I am, and you know. And then, of course, he actually sought, and this is also the deck of the article, if you remember, that I sought refuge in my wife's lactating breast when I lost my job. So yeah, these, again, very uniquely Indian realities, uniquely Indian problems and situations that these men sort of found solace in some ways or another in lactating. You know, so it wasn't really, so I would say that it wasn't sexual. There's not much of a sexual angle involved here, but it's more of emotional and nurturing and need and, you know, all of that involved here, which I found.
You know, it's very interesting. When I was reading some of the stories before we recording this podcast, I almost found one common thread in these kind of, even in your cuckolding articles and other articles written on mainstream media like Times of India, The Print, etc. It felt like almost a cathartic kind of moment, or a recurring pattern, or eventually becoming even a habit, you know. However, this very feeling, right, of like, we're talking about fetishes here, right? And fetishes have always existed everywhere. It's a pretty human tendency. But when I was living in Japan, I noticed a rather interesting manifestation of the fetish acknowledgement in society, you know. Obviously, we know Japan has a huge visual culture where fetishes is concerned, whether it's their mangas or whatever, but the infrastructure around it was very interesting. So few things I noticed. Japan has a loneliness problem, but they had come up with these, because their society was so deeply ingrained into living society in the civil way. People and most often young men who got into new jobs never had time to meet romantic partners or time for intimacy. So they came up with these bars called girl bars, right, where you pay a cover charge, and it's nothing related to prostitution or anything. You go there and there is a girl at the bar, and she asks you about your day and all of that. Then it manifests into cuddle cafes. And then, the highest form of it is within the geisha culture, which can be compared to the Tawayaf Khanas of here in India, which is a very elitist, extremely educated, some of the most educated women who had a lot of power, and some became even queens, converted to Christianity. But then another interesting thing that in Japan was these things called love hotels. So one of the most wonderful things, that one of the favorite part of this infrastructure around sexuality and, allowing people to their private spaces was these love hotels, where it was a Japanese couple, generally a married couple who had children, could not have sex at home. So they would go to this hotel, click a button in a vending machine, a light in the floor would come up. They would go to the room, and in the room and the whole duration they never met a person, because they incorporated that sense of privacy and the honor for the married couple as well, which I found very, very interesting in the society acknowledging human tendencies, right? Finally, now when you look at India, here there is catharsis, there is a mental disposition that is reacting in the form of sexual escapades. There is toxic masculinity, there is complete alienation of other genders and intergender or same gender relationships. So it plays out in a very subversive kind of dark way over here. So I wanted to understand from your research, how did you understand the landscape of people tempering their sexual desires?
Well, I think that's very interesting, these love hotels and all, because I think I've also added, if you look at my article towards the end, I've mentioned that Japan has lactation bars where you can actually get a sort of breast milk. And how in December 2014, there was a adult breastfeeding ring, sort of a prostitution ring that was busted, where young lactating mothers were paid to feed their breast milk to adults, while powdered milk was given to their own babies. So of course, sometimes in certain cultures, this takes a more demonic, I would say, illegal form. But of course, in India, I didn't see any of that from my research or from my understanding. In India, like I told you, it was more of, it was coming from various social, personal, masculine injunctions that are placed upon men, rather, right? And I think if you remember, there's one Tonkar, the Manipur guy I was telling you, because I also wanted a woman's perspective here. It wasn't just what men want and how men want to latch on, but really I was like, oh, it would be interesting to obviously speak to a woman. And I spoke to his wife, and she told me, well, it's liberating for me as well in a way, and I don't see it as something like, oh my God, like how is this happening? I'm watching TV, and he comes on and me, and that's that. As we don't, it doesn't always lead to sex. So what I'm getting at here, Anika, is that many things, and this is the larger point I want to stress on, many things that happen in our house, in our homes, right? And here I mean many homes in India, particularly, because I can obviously speak to India, seem very absurd to a different person, right? But to us, they're very, very normal. Now here, I don't mean sexual things only, right? It could be something that, let's say, your father does, something that your mother does, probably a peculiar habit your sister has, or something that my brother does. Very, very weird and peculiar those things might be. Like I told you, they don't have to be sexual really. They can be anything. But if we tell this to a third person, they become like family secrets in a way, right? If you tell this to a third person, you'll be like, okay, that's not normal. That's not good. But well, this is very normalized in our homes. Whatever it is, can be anything. This is a very broad point I want to make on this very famous documentary, Burari Deaths, on Netflix, on the Burari Deaths of Delhi.
It was a mental
the
health,
the house of deaths or something, I think it was called. I forgot. I interviewed the director, and the article also kind of blew up. The article, for those of you who want to read it, is called "A Family of 11 Were Murdered." Died of suicide. Family of 11 died of suicide, and now there's a Netflix documentary showing us how it's not over yet. She told me the same thing, that with the Burari deaths, wherein 11 people of the same family died of suicide at the same time, we can all shake our heads and be like, oh, I mean, how weird, what the fuck, oh God, this is very weird. But well, she told me, Arman, there are manifestations of this in every second home Similarly with ABF, I feel. I'm not saying ABF happens in every home in India. I'm not saying cuckolding happens in every home of India. But I'm trying to, the sense that I got from doing these three pieces, adult breastfeeding, Burari deaths, and cuckolding, is that we have remnants of these things in all our homes. And we can pretend like these things don't happen wherever we are or what we do. But well, sometimes weirder things happen in our homes. So, love hotels, like you mentioned, or lactation bars, which I mentioned in my piece, these are more organized forms of these kings. It's almost like unions. Although I don't want to diminish what unions do, but for lack of a better word, these are almost unionized forms and organized forms of these kings, for lack of a better word, or these urges or these likes, but more unorganized manifestations and more unorganized things have always happened wherever you go in almost every second home. So that is something that I completely understood from that day or those days. Any piece that I've done, I did a piece for Vogue recently on alternative models of relationships based on Gehraiyan, how how infidelity is now becoming so common that we want to look at, we should have a relook at monogamy. All of it, I think every second house has a cheating story. Either you heard of your cha-cha cheating or your mama cheating, whatever. Like I said, it's all different. Like I said, that was a common thing that every piece I've done so far in this space, relationships and sex, have all confirmed this. This is as common and as natural as it gets. But when we see it in an article, like I said, when you see it in an article or a lactation bar or a love hotel, it becomes easy to attack. And that's why we get hate comments, right?
That's a great point. Easy to attack.
Yeah, because it's concentrated. Now we can, okay, this is the enemy. Now we can be prudish as we can.
Yeah. Somehow people see it a safe option to be prudish about these things in the public eye, as opposed to acknowledging that fetishes are actually quite normal. It's a normal human urge, and every person has a different permutation and combination of these fetishes. And while your article is looking at a lot of men-women relationship, but there are same-sex, same-gender relationships. So very, very alternative sort of permutations and combinations of how people want to be intimate with either a person or another person. And these fetishes come into that play. I think one thing you mentioned in your article was that in the male gigolo article is that the gigolo was far more comfortable and gave a 50% to gay and straight couples, because in terms of his job was made a bit easier, because they were far more open to experimenting in a diverse range of expressing sexuality or intimacy for that matter. So that's an interesting perspective about, easy to attack. I like that group of words.
Yeah, and we were also talking about this earlier a little bit as well, right? Like how fetishes are also kind of like defined by social norms. And for me, I think, again, Arman, your work becomes a little interesting because as a journalist, we always think of the impact that our stories are making, right? And when we were talking earlier, you brought up this interesting example of how, like, why do men grope? Like in India, why is groping such a uniquely Indian problem? Like, what does a man get out of that crowded place and groping a woman? And as women in this country, it is something that we are almost surprised by on a day-to-day basis, even though it's so prevalent, that why do I have to like worry about being groped just because I choose to step out to a crowded place? And then we spoke a little bit about how there is this pervasive, very prevalent culture of toxic masculinity in India. And is that somehow linked to the fact that we don't have a healthy attitude towards our sexual behavior? And the reason why fetishes are like sort of so taboo? And before I throw this question back at you, I'm going to refer to your cuckolding piece, where there was a very interesting quote by somebody called David Lay, where he spoke about how conservative men might actually be drawn to cuckolding. And the quote is, the more taboo something is, the more condemned it is, for some people, the more sexually charged and exciting it becomes. And I wonder, like, I mean, what are your thoughts on this? Like, are we actually talking about the fact that, like, a very conservative society that does not have a healthy attitude to sexuality is, you know, sort of dismissing fetishes in this very hypocritical way? And that's what's leading to, let's say, violence against women, aggressive behavior, and some of the very uniquely and disturbing social problems that we see in this country that are, of course, a result of very prevalent and deeply embedded toxic masculinity. So yeah, loaded, slightly vague question, but your quick thoughts.
This is obviously very interesting because, like, as you know, you only have to look at the comments on every Vice post which is about sex, or you look at comments about these two pieces, thousands of comments. It's amazing for us to get a lot of engagement and all. But you know, if you look at those comments, there will always be one comment out of 9 which should be like, guys, this comment section didn't pass the vibe check. I don't know what are we so angry about, because this is Vice is simply highlighting what already exists, right? This is not fiction. We're not making this up. I'm not thinking about this and sitting and, you know, like, I'll write a novel about adult breastfeeding one day. I'm quoting real people, actual people who, and they're telling us why. You know, it's not porn, right? Where I'm just showing you a man, a woman, and that's that. Because I think that's what differentiates porn with journalism. That while I can talk about that sex worker or that porn star, who will, a journalist will tell you why that is. That's the only difference, I think, right? So with India, that is obviously very much a problem. I think it's a problem regardless. But you know, when this post was shared on Vice US, the main Vice page, the comments were also more or less on the same vein. They were like, "Oh wow," you know, but they were not like one of denial. I don't think I remember comments denying that. They were shocked. They were like, "Oh, what the f-?" They were tagging their friends. "Oh my God, look at this," and all of that. But I didn't see many denial comments. In India, I want to deny. Right. So when Unilad posted, by the way, this happened recently when we reposted this article. When Unilad reposted, and it was very rare that a different news publication would post our article on Vice. They posted on their Instagram, Unilad. All the comments, same. You know, they're like, "Oh wait, this is not true." And they were all Indians. You could make out with their usernames. But the non-Indians were saying, "Oh well, this is quite interesting. This is something." While Indians are wilding, and all of that. We have. I told you, you don't even have to refer to any study or any academic JSTOR article. You only have to look at the comments on a Vice post, on any post rather, which is about sex. I can tell you all that you have to know about the problem we're facing, right? Which is, we all want to live in denial. We want to portray to the world that obviously this ties into this myth that we want to live in, this myth of being sanskari, or this myth of being very, very cultured, you know. These are all myths, right? And myths, when they perpetuate, they become dangerous. And the dangerous manifestation of this kink is groping, is rape, is toxic masculinity. You know, that when men are caught in this, I don't want to, in a way, you know, make men seem as sort of this confused bechara cases, because obviously we are far from that. But you know, you get the point that they're confused. But on one hand, they have these quote unquote stupid, quote unquote unsocietal, quote unquote uncivilized urges. But well, they've been told since their childhood to be anything but that. But they're like, but then this is what I'm feeling. So then what do? You know, I like a woman's breasts. I love watching my wife have sex with somebody else. But culture tells me that it's not right. That I own my wife, quote unquote. That the wife is mine. I am the pati parmeshwar of my wife. She has to touch my feet in the morning. That's what it's in the scriptures. And this is across religions, right? But the man is the caregiver. But how can I possibly watch my wife have sex with another man who will mostly be a stranger? And then it becomes this, you know, this blast in their head. And they don't know what to do with that. So what they'll do is they just become very weird and awkward, right? And then they'll grope somebody on the street. And you'll have very, the other day, this happened as with a fellow journalist. This happened in Andheri, which is in the heart of Bombay, on the footpath, where I was seeing this very educated looking woman confronting this very educated looking man. because he was in proper formal dress. Like, and she was shouting on the street. Why? And this was 11 in the night. Why are you following me? What are you getting out of it? This is happening in front of PVR, this one, Phoenix Mall. This is the heart of Bombay. It's not happening in some dingy locality, right? This is happening in front of PVR Mall. This happened last week, where he's telling him, why are you following me? What are you getting out of it? You know, and she's speaking in English, right? And he's responding in English. This is all happening very, very, you know. And my friend and I were like, and because as men, it shocks us that this can't be happening, you know, like what the fuck, you know, because we usually want to associate it with, you know, some guy in a slum who will harass you or who will snatch away your bag from a local team. But no, this is happening on the street. And the peculiar thing was there wasn't a crowd around her. I don't know why that was, but probably that said something. That is this so normal that now we you know, because we see that we as Indians we love being bystanders. There was nobody around us, around her, you know, and then of course she just went away, and the man, very normal office looking guy, will probably have a wife and a child waiting for him when he goes home. What explains that? I don't know. I'm not a psychologist or Freudian in any way, but what that tells me as a bystander, as a citizen of this country, and as a man, is that, well, here's the man who doesn't quite know what to do with whatever he's feeling. Either get it fixed, get it treated, get it properly addressed, whatever it is, you need to acknowledge and address it. But clearly, he's not doing a very good job at it. And I feel many Indian men don't do a very good job at it, by and large. Educated men who read books, men who don't read books, men who are not in IITs, men who are in IITs, all of them. Because we don't have avenues, first of all, or we don't have maybe, I don't know, having fetish clubs would help, legalizing sex work would help. I don't know what the solutions are, but this is very much a problem that we always want to live in denial mode. And that perpetuates into our relationships as well, right? That's why, let's say, you know, the Indian men, let's say, more or less love gaslighting, or they love denying the partner's feelings. It all links into each other, this denial being the common denominator.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that's where the distinction with Japan comes in a little bit as well, because in Japan, which is a deeply conservative society, there is a very, I mean, there is an acknowledgement of your fetishes and a healthier outlet for them. You know, I mean, I won't say it's ideal, but it's, of course, you have lactation bars.
They're given that avenue, essentially.
They're given that avenue. Whereas in India, you're not, you know, it's something that's not spoken about. It's something that's considered very taboo. And I mean, we know that repression is a reason for so many of India's sort of societal problems. And this just gives a very real face to that repression. But yeah, we're running out of time. So I think we're just going to end this with a parting question for you, Arman. Like, since you work on such interesting subjects, is there any big story that you're working on that you can tell us a little bit about, or is it all hush-hush right now?
Well, as you know, as a journalist, I can't really tell you if I'm working on something. But yeah, one always wants to work on, well, I can definitely confirm and tell you for sure that I will never stop telling these stories. And the best thing is, because I have the privilege, first of all, to tell these stories, because I live in a home where my parents they might not accept this, of course, because they are also Indian parents. They will not openly say, "Arey, wow, amazing! What a great story you did," and but they will not shame me also. So I think I'm okay with that. Obviously, I can't expect my mom to tell me, "Hey, Arman, that breastfeeding is your road." Of course, she will not say that.
Can you imagine like a mom coming? Yeah, for a piece of adult breastfeeding, and great work, son.
Yeah,
sharing it on the family WhatsApp.
So that level.
Oh yes.
So although that family was thinking will read it individually, they will read it.
Yeah.
Right, because you know, with these, like I told you, with the posts on sex, we will not see a lot of likes, but we'll see a lot of saves and a lot of LinkedIn bio tags. You know, which again, like I said, ties into our whole bit of we don't want to show, we don't want to reveal. So I can confirm that you know, I will always keep working on these pieces. On these stories. As a matter of fact, just a couple of weeks back, I wrote the story on LAT, living apart together for wives. Why some people prefer this model of relationship where they want to live in separate homes, for whatever reasons, as mentioned in the article. And on that post also, we heard comments like, oh, well, this is a perfect excuse for cheating. This is a perfect excuse for this and that. But this is happening. Yeah. And in in that particular piece, we actually quoted real people with real names. But there wasn't any anonymity also, I think. And some of them also gave us their pictures. So, right. So yeah, I think I can promise you that I can assure you rather that I will always be working on these pieces, always, regardless of the hate comments we get, the likes we get, the shares we get, because these stories, I think I would like to believe I'm doing my bit, my 0.001% of just having a conversation about this topic. And if this article has maybe helped even one man that, you know what, you're not a freak, that this is perfectly okay. But if you feel it's going into unhealthy territory, talk to a therapist, or if you have a safe way of doing it consensually with your partner, you are not a freak, you're not a weirdo. And I think that's all I've ever wanted to do with journalism, is tell stories that matter, that make people feel that they're not like loners, and that it's perfectly fine to have these things as long as it's safe, healthy, and consensual.
And I think that's a perfect note to end this conversation on. Thank you, Arman, for joining us. And I think I was telling you earlier as well that we had a wish list of who we could speak to on certain subjects while Anika and I were thinking of a podcast, and you were pretty much on the top of that list for this.
Yes.
Episode. So thank you for joining us, and we are going to end this podcast on that note.
Thank you for having me.